everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap up. So in June I read 15 books, which was 4,925 pages, and my average star rating was 3.82. I read a mixture of thriller and romance mainly, but I think I was leaning more into romance for the summer. An average rating of 3.82 is pretty high for me so far this year. I think it might be one of the higher average star ratings I've had in a month. I think I only had one romance under 4 stars, and that was 3.5. The rest I think were 4 and above. A lot of the lower ratings were thrillers, which brought the average down. But having said that, I don't think any of the thrillers were below 3 stars. I could be wrong. I guess we'll find out. But let's just get started. So we're going to start with romance, and we're going to start strong with my favorite book of the month, which was Summer in the City. I absolutely loved this book. It's not too long, but it was just so... I just absolutely loved it. I haven't read a ton of books with like the billionaire trope, but I think I might look into some of them now. I think Elsie Silver has that series that are like billionaire romances, and like the 4th one's about to come out. I think I have the first one, Wild Love, I think it's called. I'm not sure. Anyway, so Summer in the City, we have our main character, Elle, and she's a screenwriter. She's experiencing some writer's block, so she goes to stay at her sister's really nice apartment in Manhattan. I believe it's like a penthouse apartment. And so she's staying there to like house sit during some renovations. And then she bumps into one of the neighbors on the floor, and he is known as like the billionaire bachelor of New York City. His name is Parker Wallen, I think. No. His name is Parker Warren, which of course it is. That is just such a perfect name for like this type of character. This isn't exactly the first time that Parker and Elle have met. They'd actually met 2 years prior to this, after they had like a hookup situation at a club stairwell or something, and then they never spoke again. So it's dubbed as like a lovers to enemies type situation. It kind of helps both of them if they do like a fake dating situation. I love the fake dating trope. It's one of my favorites, and I absolutely love this. I would recommend it to like every romance reader. Next, I read Every Summer After, and this one I gave 4.5 stars. I'm very late to the hype on this one. This one is set in a small town in Canada called Barry's Bay, and we have our main character, Persephone or Percy, and our love interest, Sam. When she was growing up, she spent 6 summers going to Barry's Bay with her family, and she worked at Sam's family's restaurant. So she worked with Sam. They kind of like had this unrequited situation, and then she just never went back. She lives in downtown Toronto now, doing her own thing, living her own life, and she gets a call that Sam's mother has passed away. So she goes racing back to Barry's Bay to attend the funeral. And of course she like runs into Sam and they start talking. This book is told in like dual timelines over the 6 summers and then the present day. I really love this. I loved our 2 main characters. I love them together. I love them separately. I wasn't sure if I would like this just because I've heard a lot of people didn't like the second one that came out after this, I think. But I have heard really good things about this, and I think I just saw something about this being turned into like a TV show or a movie. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I saw something about that the other day. Next, I read Not in Love, and this one I gave 4 stars. This one I mainly picked up because Problematic Summer Romance just came out and it follows Not in Love. So I wanted to read Not in Love first, even though they are like an interconnected standalone situation. I rushed to read this one so I could pick up Problematic Summer Romance in July, which I'll talk about in like a July wrap up. In this one, we have our main character, Rue, and she is a biotech engineer at a very promising tech startup company. Then we have our love interest, Eli, and he's the co-founder of another really successful tech startup situation, I think with 3 of his friends from university. Rue and Eli meet, and then very soon after that, Eli is at her work and she doesn't know why. His company is trying to do like a hostile takeover of the company she works for. They have this like undeniable attraction to each other and chemistry. There's a lot of possibility for betrayal and just like trust being broken and trust issues. I really liked how we saw into Rue and Eli's private lives and what could be their motivations for doing what they were doing on behalf of their companies. So I thought that made for like a very well-rounded story, especially for something that is very like spice heavy. This was only my 3rd Ali Hazelwood book. I don't have a lot to compare it to because my first one that I ever read by her was Bride, which was like her first paranormal fantasy type romance. And then the one I read after that was Deep End, which was also like a newer type of book that she was exploring writing in. So I don't have a lot to compare this one to like The Love Hypothesis or the other like STEM romances, but I did really like this one, and I am happy that I read it even though it was just to read. The next one I also read Nobody in Particular, and this one I gave 4.25 stars. This one is actually young adult, and it's the only young adult I have in my wrap up, and I really liked it. In this one we have our two main characters, Danny and Princess Rosemary, or Rose, and they both go to an elite boarding school in England. They both come from like very different backgrounds. Rose is there because she's from a very wealthy family. She's like some sort of royalty. She's a princess. And then Danny doesn't quite come from the same background as her, which does cause like some turbulence when they start to become friends. They start secretly dating and they can't tell anyone. Rose is very much in the public eye and she's very scared that if it's found out that she's dating a girl, everything's going to be ruined. Basically, there's a lot of friend drama. You see a lot of like family drama, and then also obviously what's going on with Danny and Rose. I really like this. I felt it was really well rounded in terms of seeing bits and pieces from both of their lives from so many different aspects. You could see kind of where they were both coming from with both of their worries and concerns regarding them dating. So having said that, I really like this one. Like I said, I gave it 4.25 stars, and I really want to look into what else this author has written. I also read Summer Romance, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. In this one we have our main character Allie, and she is a professional organizer. However, her mom passed away 2 years ago, and then her husband has left her, so not only is her house like physically a mess and like in shambles, but mentally she's also not doing too hot. And so she's kind of trying to come out of this depression pit that she's in. So she meets Ethan. She decides she's gonna just have some summer fun and just kind of see what happens. I'm not gonna lie to you, I really don't remember much else about this at all, which I think is why I gave it 3.5 stars. All these other ones I'm remembering a lot about them, which is actually pretty rare since I'm filming this in August and it's a June wrap up. Even reading the synopsis just now, I'm like, that reminds me of nothing. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. I remember being underwhelmed by it and just felt like nothing really happened, I guess. It was my first book by Annabelle Monaghan, and I was very excited to read it because I've just heard so many great things about her books, but this one just definitely did not do it for me, but I still would pick up another one of her books. Next, I read Till Summer Do Us Part, and this one I gave 4.75 stars. I had so much fun with this one. It was so close to being 5 stars, but I just didn't get that like 5-star feeling, but 4.75 is still like an amazing rating for me. I absolutely loved this. It was so funny. It was so comical, but it also dealt with a lot of like heavier subjects. And I think the balance of the two was just done so well. We have our main character Scotty and the love interest Wilder. Scotty has just started a new job and it seems that everyone is married, and she's kind of like the butt of the joke a lot of the time in the boardroom. And then somehow it comes up in a meeting that she says she actually is married, but they're going through some troubles and that's why she's not wearing a ring. And unfortunately for her, her boss's husband is a very well-known, renowned couples therapist, and he also does like a couples therapy marriage saving retreat in the summer, and she tells Scotty that her and her husband like have to go on it and it's all paid for and everything. So now the only problem is she has to find someone to recruit as her fake husband to go on this retreat with her. She asks one of her best friends if he knows anyone, and he says that his brother is very bored right now, and so he recruits his brother. So they end up going. Scotty and Wilder have never met before this, and just seeing these two interact is so funny. They have completely different personality types, but they definitely bring out the best in each other. They very much heavily leaned into the acting and pretending that they were married, especially the fights. However, there were a lot of true issues that Scotty brought up that she was feeling from a previous relationship that she was still dealing with. We saw a lot of true like raw moments as well, and I just absolutely love this. I actually might just bump it up to 5 stars because as I'm talking about it, I'm just like loving it even more. I might even reread this next year, which isn't common for me with a romance unless it is 5 stars. So I might bump this up to 5 stars. Lastly, for romance, I have Savor It, and this one I gave 5 stars. We have our main character Sage and the love interest named Fisher. It takes place in a very small town in Oregon called Spoons, and it makes a Twilight reference at the beginning where it says not to be mistaken with Forks, Washington, which I absolutely loved. Sage is from the small town. She lives there. She absolutely loves it. At the beginning of the book, we see Fisher ending his like cross-country road trip with his niece because they are moving to the small town. Fisher was a very well-known, popular, famous chef in New York City, but then his sister passed away, and so he has to start taking care of his niece. He dealt with some work troubles, and so they sent him off to the small town to scout it out and open a restaurant and kind of manage it, or just like get it open. So he moves there temporarily for the summer with his niece, and Sage is his neighbor. Sage's ex-boyfriend is like the golden boy of this town, and he gets engaged. So she feels like she kind of needs to one-up him, or at least show everyone that she's doing just fine on her own without him. So she forms an alliance of sorts with Fisher so that she can show everyone she's just fine and she's moving on. It's just very heartwarming. We get dual points of view, and I absolutely love that in a romance, especially in this one because we get to see Fisher interact with his niece and the motivations behind some of the decisions he's making. This one was 5 stars and I absolutely loved it. There is another one in this interconnected standalone series that's already out, and I'm gonna wait until next year to pick that one up. So now moving on to thrillers, and I read 6 in the month of June. I'm going to kind of rapid fire through these just because I don't remember a ton about them. I gave most of them like 3 stars, which like I said is a pretty good rating, but I just didn't love any of them. First up, we have Catfight, and this one I gave 3 stars. It had so many things that I normally love in a thriller. It had multiple points of view. It was like rich people behaving badly. It took place in a wealthy, affluent suburb, and there was a ton of like community drama. I normally love that stuff. However, this one definitely went off the rails a bit with one of the plot points, pretty much the main plot point. It all kind of comes to a head because one of the husbands spots a big cat, like a leopard type situation, when they are having like a barbecue with some of the neighbors, and it just kind of goes from there. You get insight from one of the points of view more into this big cat situation. It was kind of weird. I would not recommend it if you just like the typical psychological thriller of like rich people behaving badly, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't recommend it just because that's what I was expecting, and I definitely got something way different. But having said that, I didn't hate it. I just wasn't in love with it. The payoff wasn't really worth it, and when there was like 150 pages left, I remember saying to myself, like, how is there still 150 pages left in this? Like, how are we still going? Like, it's time to wrap it up. So yeah, this one I gave 3 stars. I would maybe lower it to 2.75. I also read Now She's Dead, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. This one is a YA thriller about like a lake town during the summer, and one of the girls winds up dead. She's like murdered by the side of the lake, and then it takes place the following summer. So Mandy, our main character, is seemingly the only one that knows what happened to Sarah and like how she died, and it says that she is determined to keep it a secret. Since last summer, she was barely keeping it together at school. She was definitely kind of spiraling, not really keeping it together, and she really didn't want to go back this summer. However, she did, and she's hearing all the whisperings about what happened to Sarah. It seems like someone wants revenge for what happened to Sarah, and Mandy's getting very paranoid and feels like she is being targeted and something bad is going to happen to her. So like I said, this one I gave 3.5 stars, and it's a pretty good YA thriller. Next, I read We Live Here Now, and this one I gave 3 stars. We have our main character Emily, and after an accident that almost killed her, her and her husband moved from London to this like very remote old manor. There's a lot of bizarre, creepy, scary, old haunted house style things happening. However, as part of Emily's accident that almost killed her, she had sepsis, and so she's kind of always on the lookout for getting sepsis again. And one of the symptoms is like being paranoid and like having delusions and hallucinations. So she's very much like gaslighting herself about what is real or what isn't real. This one was less than 300 pages, and I remember just thinking like, not much was happening. I felt very bored reading it, and that's not normally like me with like thrillers, or this one was kind of like more thriller horror, I think. And I was just really bored. I wasn't really invested in the characters or the storyline. Like, I just didn't really find myself caring much about any of it. So yeah, this one I gave 3 stars, and I would recommend it if that like seems to be your vibe, like that's your type of book, because I saw a lot of really good ratings and reviews from a lot of people. So I really just wish I had loved this a lot more. Next, I read Jill Is Not Happy, and this one I also gave 3 stars. Jill and Jack, or Jack and Jill, are college sweethearts, and now they're experiencing an empty nest for the first time because their daughter has moved and gone to college. So Jill has decided that they need to take a road trip together and go to Utah. The last thing Jack wants to do is go on a road trip with his wife. He says the only reason why he's still in the marriage is because of a dark shared secret that they have. He tells himself that he's going to divorce her as soon as they get home. However, he doesn't really realize just how far Jill would go to keep him and their marriage, and he doesn't really know that she will do whatever it takes to stay together. So we just kind of see everything unfold, and we just see what Jill is willing to do, ready to do, willing to give up, willing to sacrifice to keep her marriage to Jack. And yeah, this one was just like, okay, I don't really remember a lot of it apart from that. Next, I read Break Me Down, and this one is like an audio thriller. It's a very good like audio production. I really like that aspect of it. We have our main character Georgia, and she was a child actress, so she has recently decided to move back to LA to kind of restore her acting career. However, she very quickly gets sucked into this like acting co-op cult type situation, and you just see that unfold. Part of the synopsis says, as the lines between the pursuit of art and the survival of the self begin to blur, everything Georgia holds dear starts slipping away, revealing the true price of a dream. Break Me Down is a testament to the power of art to heal, destroy, and ultimately transform. So this one sounds like everything I would love in a thriller, but I just didn't really connect with it. I didn't love it. It was just kind of okay. It was fun to have on while I was cooking and cleaning, but I didn't really feel invested in it pretty much at all. And then lastly, I have my one fantasy, and I read The Enchanted Greenhouse, and this is a follow-up to The Spell Shop. In this one, we have our main character, Turlu. I think that's how you say it. And she worked at this big like archival library. And then she broke a rule by making a plant sentient. And so she was turned into a statue. However, then the main city that the library's in, like years later, is going through some sort of like revolt. And one of the librarians takes away the statue curse and turns her back into like a living being because she doesn't want her to just be like burned or destroyed with the library during this whole city revolt situation. So she's sent to an island where there's one other person living, and he runs a bunch of greenhouses on this island. However, there's like a rot going on. The greenhouses are failing, the plant life, the wildlife, everything's kind of just like falling apart on this island. So she's on a quest to figure out what's going on with the greenhouses and this whole rot situation, and how she can use magic and spells to figure it out. She thinks that someone put a curse on the island, so she's trying to get to the bottom of that. Meanwhile, we have Yarrow, who is the resident of this island, and he's very like grumpy and surly. He's not really wanting to be in anyone's company. He's fine being isolated. However, he starts to warm up to her as she's offering his help, and it just kind of goes from there. This one is very cozy. It's very similar to The Spell Shop in vibe, and it takes place around the same time in like the same geographical area. I really love this one. I gave it 4.25 stars. It was an amazing, not disappointing follow-up to The Spell Shop. I think I might have even liked this more than The Spell Shop. If I had to pick one of the two, I would definitely pick this one. So I guess I did like it more than The Spell Shop. I would really highly recommend it. You don't need to read The Spell Shop first, but I would recommend it just because there are little bits and pieces that are kind of nice, like throwbacks to that book. If you like cozy fantasy, definitely give this one a try. They're not totally the same, but if you like Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, definitely give this one a try because I think you would love it too. So that is my June wrap up. I had a lot of hits, some misses, some like right in the middle, but I had a lot of fun reading the books that I read in June. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye.